In the early days of cryptocurrency's public explosion, Bitcoin mining carried the smell of digital adventure. It sounded like a modern treasure hunt, except instead of pickaxes, dusty boots, and lanterns, miners used computers, electricity, and math. The idea was simple enough to dazzle almost anyone. Powerful machines solved complex cryptographic puzzles, and in return, new cryptocurrency was created. To many everyday investors, this felt like a doorway into a financial future that Wall Street had not yet fully captured. Bitcoin was no longer just an online curiosity whispered about in tech forums. It was becoming a symbol of freedom, rebellion, innovation, and, for some, instant riches. But there was one problem. Actually mining Bitcoin was expensive, technical, noisy, hot, and complicated. It required specialized equipment, cheap electricity, cooling systems, technical skill, and patience. The average person did not want to fill a garage with screaming machines or spend thousands of dollars on hardware that might become obsolete before it paid for itself. The gap between fantasy and reality created the perfect business opportunity: cloud mining. Companies promised customers they could rent computing power from professional mining farms and receive a share of the cryptocurrency produced. No equipment, no electric bill, no maintenance. Just pay for a contract, log into a dashboard, and watch the digital coins roll in. HashFlare entered this world like a polished carnival booth at a gold rush fair. It offered customers the dream of mining without the headache of actually mining. Investors could purchase contracts for computing power, known as hash power, and HashFlare would supposedly do the heavy lifting behind the scenes. The company's pitch was attractive because it mixed technical complexity with emotional simplicity. The technology sounded advanced enough to feel legitimate, while the customer experience felt easy enough for almost anyone to participate. That combination is powerful. It makes people feel both sophisticated and safe. The founders, Sergei Potapenko and Ivan Turõgin, presented HashFlare as part of a broader crypto business ecosystem. Their related company, HashCoins, appeared to manufacture mining equipment, while HashFlare offered cloud mining contracts to the public. Later, Polybius was promoted as a digital banking venture. Together, these brands created the appearance of a growing crypto empire. There were websites, dashboards, promotional materials, corporate language, and the seductive rhythm of a modern startup story. To the ordinary investor, it did not look like a back-alley scheme. It looked like the future wearing a business suit. But behind the glossy promise was a dangerous question. Were the mining servers actually there? Every great fraud depends on a stage, a spotlight, and a distraction. In the HashFlare case, the stage was cryptocurrency. The spotlight was cloud mining. The distraction was the dashboard. A dashboard can be hypnotic. Numbers move, balances update, charts rise and fall, buttons glow. For many investors, seeing activity on a screen creates a sense of proof. If the account says mining is happening, surely mining must be happening. If the balance grows, surely the servers must be running. If the website looks professional, surely the business must exist as advertised. But a dashboard is not a mining farm. A number on a screen is not the same as a machine producing cryptocurrency. In financial frauds, appearances often arrive before evidence, and confidence often substitutes for verification. Cloud mining was especially vulnerable to deception because most customers could not physically inspect the mining equipment. They could not walk into the data center, check the machines, review electricity usage, or verify actual hash rate. They had to trust that the company selling the contract possessed the computing power it claimed to sell. This made the product unusually abstract. Hash power is not like a chair, a car, or a house. You cannot touch it. You cannot easily see whether your exact share exists. You receive a promise connected to invisible infrastructure. That invisibility was the heart of the ghost server problem. The scheme allegedly depended on selling customers more mining power than the company actually had. In other words, investors believed they were buying access to real computing capacity, but much of that capacity was allegedly fictional. It was like selling tickets to seats in a stadium that had never been built. As long as people kept buying tickets, the illusion could continue. But eventually, someone would ask to see the stadium. HashFlare's appeal also came from the way crypto culture blurred the line between technical expertise and speculative hope. Many investors understood enough to know that Bitcoin mining could be profitable, but not enough to audit a cloud mining business. They knew words like hash rate, mining contract, and block reward. But they did not necessarily know how to test whether a provider's claimed mining output matched real-world capacity. That knowledge gap became fertile ground for manipulation. In traditional Ponzi schemes, fraudsters often promise investment returns from a mysterious trading strategy, secret real estate deal, or exclusive financial system. In HashFlare's world, the mystery wore a digital costume. Instead of "trust me, I have a secret investment method." The message became "trust us, our servers are mining." The costume changed. The structure did not. The genius and danger of the HashFlare model was that it sold participation in production rather than a simple investment. Customers were not merely told, "Give us money and we will make you rich." They were told, in effect, "Buy mining capacity from us, and the machines will generate cryptocurrency for you." That distinction mattered. It made the arrangement feel mechanical, almost automatic. If machines were running, coins would be mined. If coins were mined, customers would receive payouts. The profits seemed to come from technology rather than from recruitment or financial engineering. But according to federal prosecutors, the reality was far more troubling. The operation allegedly did not have the computing power necessary to support the mining contracts it sold. Customers purchased contracts believing they were backed by real machines, while the company allegedly used false information to make it appear as though mining was happening at the promised scale. That is where the ghost server metaphor becomes so useful. These were not necessarily literal ghost machines sitting in a haunted data center. They were promised machines, implied machines, dashboard machines, servers that existed in the customer's imagination and the company's marketing, but not in sufficient real-world capacity. The financial scale was enormous. Hundreds of thousands of customers around the world reportedly paid hundreds of millions of dollars into the companies connected to Potapenko and Turõgin. The amount attached to the case, roughly $575 million to $577 million, places it among the largest crypto fraud prosecutions in the United States. This was not a small group of friends fooled in a private investment club. It was an international operation built on the mass market appeal of cryptocurrency. The scheme's success depended on momentum. Early customers needed to see something that looked like earnings. New customers needed to hear enough positive stories to feel comfortable buying contracts. The company needed to maintain the impression that its mining capacity was vast, active, and profitable. In that sense, HashFlare resembled a financial theater production. The website was the curtain. The dashboards were the props. The mining language was the script. The customers were both audience and funders, and like all financial theater, the performance had to keep expanding. Once a company sells more capacity than it truly has, it creates a hole. To cover that hole, it needs more money, more customers, more explanations, and more time. Every new sale can temporarily delay the reckoning, but it also deepens the deception. The more successful the scheme becomes, the harder it is to unwind honestly. Fraud grows like a snowball rolling downhill, slow at first, then too large to stop without crushing everything beneath it. The word Ponzi is sometimes used too casually, but in this case it captures the basic logic prosecutors described. A Ponzi scheme typically uses money from new participants to satisfy obligations to earlier participants, while pretending the returns come from legitimate business activity. The fake profit engine may vary. Sometimes it is stock trading, sometimes it is foreign currency, sometimes it is real estate. In the crypto era, it may be mining, staking, lending, yield farming, or some other technical-sounding process. The disguise evolves with the times. HashFlare's alleged profit engine was cloud mining. Customers believed their payouts came from actual cryptocurrency mining, but if the company lacked enough mining equipment to produce the promised results, then payouts and account activity had to be supported by something else. That something else is where Ponzi logic enters. When the claimed business activity cannot generate the promised returns, the scheme must rely on incoming customer funds, manipulated records, or both. This is why frauds often appear strongest right before they collapse. As long as new money flows in, Customers may receive enough payments or dashboard activity to remain confident. Complaints can be dismissed as misunderstandings. Delays can be blamed on market conditions, maintenance, blockchain congestion, contract terms, or technical upgrades. In cryptocurrency especially, volatility provides an all-purpose fog machine. Prices rise and fall wildly. Mining profitability changes. Transaction fees fluctuate. Difficulty levels adjust. A dishonest operator can hide behind real complexity, but complexity does not eliminate accountability. If a company sells mining power, it should possess or control the mining power it sells. If it shows customers mining outputs, those outputs should reflect real mining activity. If it claims to operate at scale, there should be evidence. Machines, electricity bills, pool records, blockchain data, facility contracts, and technical logs. Fraud investigators know this. Eventually, the invisible world of crypto must collide with the visible world of records. The HashFlare case also shows how Ponzi schemes exploit optimism. Many victims are not foolish, they are hopeful. They may be hardworking people trying to get ahead, parents looking for an extra income stream, tech enthusiasts excited about innovation, or investors afraid of missing the next big thing. Fraudsters do not need victims to be ignorant. They need them to be eager. Eagerness lowers the guard. A rising market lowers it further. HashFlare was not the only venture connected to the case. Polybius, promoted as a digital bank project, added another layer to the story. If HashFlare sold access to crypto mining, Polybius sold the dream of financial reinvention. The name itself evoked seriousness, almost classical authority, as if the future of banking had been wrapped in ancient-sounding credibility. In the crypto boom, that kind of branding mattered. A project did not simply need a product, it needed a mythology. The idea of a crypto-friendly digital bank was attractive because traditional banking often seemed slow, expensive, and hostile to cryptocurrency businesses. Many crypto users dreamed of a financial system that could merge digital assets with everyday banking services. A company promising to build that bridge could attract significant attention. Investors were not just buying a product, they were buying a seat in what they believed might become the next financial revolution. But prosecutors alleged that Polybius was part of the broader fraudulent conduct. Investor funds were allegedly solicited for a digital bank project, while the money did not go toward building what investors were led to expect. Like HashFlare, Polybius benefited from the era's emotional atmosphere. Cryptocurrency was not merely an asset class, it was a movement. People wanted to believe they were early. They wanted to believe they had discovered something before banks, governments, and old institutions caught up. That early believer psychology is one of the most important ingredients in crypto fraud. Traditional scams often promise safety. Crypto scams often promise destiny. They tell investors, you are not late, you are ahead. You are not gambling, you are visionary. You are not being sold to, you are joining the future. Once an investment becomes part of a person's identity, skepticism feels like betrayal. Doubt becomes emotionally expensive. Polybius helped widen the narrative beyond mining. It suggested that the people behind HashFlare were not merely running servers, but building an ecosystem. Ecosystems sound durable. They imply multiple businesses, revenue streams, technical teams, and long-term vision. In fraud, an ecosystem can also become a maze. Money moves between entities. Investors struggle to understand which company does what. Responsibility becomes harder to pin down. The story grows grand enough to distract from the basic question, where did the money go? Fraud does not end when money is collected. The next challenge is movement. Large sums of illicit money create a practical problem for criminals. How to spend, hide, convert, and preserve it without making the trail obvious. According to prosecutors, Potapenko and Turõgin used shell companies to launder proceeds and purchase assets, including real estate and luxury cars. That detail matters because it shows the alleged scheme was not only about false promises on the front end. It was also about financial concealment on the back end. Shell companies can serve legitimate purposes, but in fraud cases, they are often used like financial fog. Money passes from one entity to another, sometimes across borders, sometimes through accounts with vague business descriptions. sometimes through transactions that appear unrelated to the original victims. The more layers added, the harder it becomes for investigators, victims, and courts to trace funds clearly. Laundering is the art of making dirty money look like it arrived from somewhere clean. Luxury purchases are another familiar feature in large frauds. They reveal the emotional core of the crime. Fraudsters often present themselves as innovators, entrepreneurs, or financial geniuses, but the money trail frequently leads to houses, cars, watches, travel, and status. The public story says, "We are building the future." The private spending says, "We are enjoying the proceeds now." That contrast is one reason fraud cases provoke such anger. Victims imagine their savings funding technology, only to learn they may have funded someone else's lifestyle. The international nature of the case made it even more complicated. The defendants were Estonian nationals, the alleged victims were spread across countries, and the prosecution took place in the United States. Cryptocurrency itself moves easily across borders, while law enforcement must work through treaties, extradition processes, banking records, and jurisdictional rules. This mismatch, borderless money versus bordered law, is one of the defining challenges of modern financial crime. Yet the case also shows that borderless does not mean consequence-free. The defendants were arrested in Estonia, extradited to the United States, pleaded guilty, and were sentenced. The machinery of law may move more slowly than cryptocurrency, but it can still move. Every fraudulent empire has a moment when the story stops working. For HashFlare, scrutiny from law enforcement transformed customer suspicions into criminal allegations. The indictment accused Potapenko and Turõgin of involvement in a massive fraud and money laundering conspiracy. The government's theory was direct. Customers were induced to buy HashFlare mining contracts based on false claims, and investors were also drawn into Polybius under misleading pretenses. The defendants were arrested in Tallinn, Estonia, in November 2022. Their extradition to the United States followed later, after legal proceedings in Estonia. Once in the United States, the case moved toward resolution. In February 2025, both men pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud. In August 2025, they were sentenced to 16 months in prison, with the court recognizing time already served, and were also ordered to pay fines and complete community service. The sentencing drew attention because the fraud amount was enormous, yet the custodial sentence was far shorter than many observers expected. Prosecutors had emphasized the scale of the harm, while the court ultimately imposed a sentence that reflected its own analysis of the plea, custody already served, and legal considerations. For victims, the result may have felt unsatisfying. When hundreds of millions of dollars are involved, a sentence measured in months can feel emotionally mismatched to the scale of the damage, but criminal sentencing is not always a simple moral equation. Courts weigh statutes, guidelines, plea agreements, evidence, cooperation, loss calculations, custody history, and other factors. The public often sees the headline number and expects the punishment to mirror it. The legal system moves through narrower channels. The gap between public outrage and courtroom procedure is common in financial crime. Still, the fall of HashFlare delivered an unmistakable message. The servers may have been ghostly, but the consequences were real. Victims lost money. Investigators followed trails. Prosecutors built a case. Guilty pleas were entered. The myth of effortless cloud mining wealth collided with the hard floor of criminal law. A figure like $577 million is so large that it can become strangely abstract. The mind struggles to hold it. It becomes a headline, a statistic, a symbol. But behind that number were individual victims. Some may have invested small amounts out of curiosity. Others may have put in savings they could not afford to lose. Some likely told friends and family. Some may have reinvested apparent earnings, believing they had found a reliable income source. Some may have blamed themselves long after the scheme unraveled. Financial fraud creates a special kind of wound because it attacks trust. Victims often feel embarrassment as well as anger. They replay decisions. They wonder why they did not ask more questions. They remember the moment they clicked buy, the first payout, the reassuring dashboard, the forum posts, the promotional claims. Fraud turns hope into evidence against the victim in their own mind. That is one of its cruelest effects. But the responsibility belongs to the deceivers, not the deceived. Sophisticated frauds are designed to overcome ordinary caution. They use professional websites, technical language, social proof, partial payouts, customer support, and industry trends. In the crypto world, they also use the fact that even legitimate projects can sound confusing. When everything is complex, complexity itself stops feeling suspicious. The HashFlare victims were participating in a moment when cryptocurrency was widely portrayed as a once-in-a-generation opportunity. People saw stories of early Bitcoin adopters becoming millionaires. They heard warnings that traditional money was outdated. They watched prices surge and worried that hesitation would cost them their chance. Scammers thrive in that emotional climate. Fear of missing out is not just a feeling, it is a business model. The FBI's victim outreach underscored the broad human footprint of the case. Large fraud investigations depend not only on documents and blockchain analysis, but also on victim accounts. Each victim helps reconstruct the promises made, the payments sent, the dashboards shown, and the losses suffered. In that sense, victims are not merely passive casualties. They become witnesses to the architecture of deception. HashFlare did not invent the Ponzi scheme, it updated the wardrobe. Charles Ponzi used postal reply coupons in the 1920s. Later fraudsters used fake hedge funds, bogus real estate projects, sham promissory notes, and imaginary trading strategies. HashFlare belonged to a newer generation of schemes that used cryptocurrency's technical mystique as camouflage. Crypto offered several advantages to fraudsters. First, it was difficult for many people to understand. Second, it was associated with rapid wealth creation. Third, it had a culture of distrust toward traditional regulators, which made warnings easier to dismiss. Fourth, transactions and assets could move internationally with unusual speed. Fifth, the market was filled with legitimate-sounding jargon that could be weaponized. Cloud mining added yet another layer. Unlike buying a token, cloud mining allowed customers to believe they were participating in production. The company was not merely holding funds, at least in theory. It was operating machines. It was doing work. It was creating value. That made the promise feel more grounded than pure speculation. But because the machines were remote and unverifiable to most customers, the model also created a perfect hiding place. The phrase, ghost server Ponzi scheme, captures this contradiction beautifully. The fraud was both highly technical and painfully old-fashioned. It involved cryptocurrency, dashboards, hash power, and digital banking dreams. But underneath, it depended on the same ancient ingredients: trust, greed, opacity, momentum, and lies. The lesson is not that all cryptocurrency is fraudulent or that all cloud mining is automatically fake. The lesson is that technical language does not replace proof. A legitimate business should be able to provide verifiable evidence of its operations. In mining, that evidence might include facility information, mining pool data, equipment records, electricity consumption, audited financials, and transparent payout methodology. When a company asks for trust but resists verification, investors should hear alarm bells. The HashFlare case offers several lessons for investors, regulators, and the broader public. The first is simple: do not confuse a dashboard with reality. A website can display anything. Numbers on a screen must be supported by independent evidence. In finance, appearance is cheap, verification is expensive, and that is why it matters. The second lesson is that complexity should increase caution, not reduce it. Many people become less skeptical when they do not understand something because they assume the confusion is their fault. Fraudsters exploit that humility. A better rule is this: if an investment cannot be explained clearly, verified independently, and connected to real revenue, it deserves deeper scrutiny. The third lesson is that high-demand trends attract both builders and predators. Cryptocurrency produced real innovations, but it also produced an environment where scammers could dress old frauds in futuristic language. Every boom has its parasites. During gold rushes, some people find gold, but many more sell fake maps, broken tools, and imaginary claims. The fourth lesson is that international enforcement matters. The HashFlare case required cooperation across borders and years of legal movement. In a digital economy, fraud can be global from day one. Law enforcement must be equally coordinated, technically skilled and persistent. Finally, the case reminds us that financial dreams are deeply human. People want security, they want opportunity, they want to believe they are making wise decisions for themselves and their families. That desire is not shameful, it is normal. But when opportunity is wrapped in secrecy, urgency, and unverifiable claims, hope can become the doorway through which fraud enters. HashFlare's ghost servers are a symbol of the crypto era's darkest temptation, the promise of invisible machines producing effortless wealth somewhere far away. For a while, the illusion worked, the dashboards glowed, the contracts sold, the empire expanded, but eventually the lights came on and the mine was not what customers had been led to believe. In the end, HashFlare was not just a story about cryptocurrency, it was a story about belief. It was about how technology can make old tricks look new, how ambition can disguise warning signs, and how a company can sell the sound of machines humming in the distance, even when the machines are mostly ghosts. The tragedy is measured in hundreds of millions of dollars, but the warning is priceless. In any gold rush, always make sure the mine is real before you buy a shovel. Think this story was shocking? The deeper you dig, the darker it gets. Watch our investigative series exposing the rise and collapse of powerful political empires. Hit subscribe to CorruptRoots and tell us in the comments, what hidden trail of corruption should we uncover next?